Hi folks, welcome to the Prepared Homestead. Thank you all for stopping by to watch. Just had a bug fly right into my nose. It is warming up. We're in the mid 60s today, and I'm telling you, but as you can see, there's still ice. This little creek here, it's hard to do this in the camera. This little creek here that runs into the big creek, there's still quite a bit of ice in it, but the rest of it is going pretty good. I understand that some of you are still dealing with cold winter, but it is warming up here. And so we're going to talk about growing food, and I'm going to give you some specifics, some numbers. I've been crunching numbers to kind of give you a general idea of what kind of volume that you need to be producing, or at least some ideas on how much you need to be producing to produce enough food to eventually get to where you're living off of what you produce. And these are just some general ballpark numbers that I've been number crunching for you. I do want to mention, if you wouldn't mind, to go ahead and click the like and subscribe button to the channel. It helps spread the word and bring more people on board so that they can watch videos. Have you seen the gas prices lately? How are they doing in your area? Here, I filled up yesterday, and I think, if as best as I can remember, gas prices have increased somewhere between 50 and 55 cents a gallon over the last 6 or so weeks, maybe 8 weeks. That's a pretty significant increase, especially when, as we all know, pretty much everything else has been increasing. Food, lumber, all sorts of stuff. This trend is probably not going to go away. So because of increasing of goods, and of course, if the gas prices, fuel costs going up, everything's going to go up even more. Just the uncertainty. Look at all the political stuff that's going on. I mean, I saw a video today of the Dr. Fakey, saying that, we're going to have to wear this for at least probably another year or two. And just because you get the little in the arm, you're not going to still be able to just go back to normal society. You still can't go to restaurants. You still can't go out to, movie theaters and bowling alleys. You still got to keep yourself locked up. It's crazy. And even though he even said, even though the numbers have gone down, it's still going up, and it's really bad. What kind of science is that? The numbers are going down, but it's still getting worse. Anyways, that's just a taste of all the stuff that's going on. You and I know about this. It's not ending. On top of all that, and all the uncertainty globally, and everything that's going on politically, and how our society is decaying and just going down the, great white throne more and more rapidly, we're also dealing with some changes, possibly, with our climate. I'm not talking about global warming and the man-made climate change. I'm talking about things that actually happen, cyclical changes. We talk about it all the time. Grand solar minimum, the magnetic, the weakening magnetic field here on the Earth, potential pole shifting is what these are things that look like they're in the beginning stages. I'll leave a link in the description of an interview done in Russia with a Russian scientist several years ago, talking about this grand solar minimum, and they were saying that it should start hitting in the early 2020s, and they're predicting, their climate numbers are showing that we're talking about climate changes that resemble the Marauder, period of grand solar minimum, which is back in the 1600s. That's when a lot of people refer to it as a mini ice age. Not technically an ice age, but that's what they refer to it. I'm going to put up a couple of pictures on here. These may not be significant to you at all, okay? And they don't look similar only because what they are, these are global temperature. These are maps with global temperatures. One is from the average global temperature decrease during that last big grand solar minimum in the 16 and 1700s. And one is February 19th, just a few days ago, during the big deep freeze all over the planet. And they don't look similar only because they use different coloration for the temperature changes. But if you kind of study these, one thing I notice is that the big drop in temperature in both maps are in the same general area. And these scientists have predicted the areas that will be the most affected with the grand solar minimum are the areas that we saw the worst cold, not just here in the United States, but over into Europe and into the Asian continent. And so I'm going to put these up here. I'll just keep talking. This may not be significant. I know this isn't scientific, but it does kind of indicate that, it's possible that we're heading in that direction. So all of this is being said to say, you really need to get serious about food. I talk about how serious it is to grow your own food and to raise your own food. Some of you do this already and have done it for years, and I applaud you. And my only suggestion is to just do more of it. You need to learn how to grow your own food. This is not something, it's not like it is on TV where you just go out there and stick a seed in the ground and next thing you know, you're harvesting tomatoes. There's some skill, some science, a little art to it. You got to know how to do it, and it takes practice. And even when you have done it for years like myself, there's still years that you have crop failures or that things just don't work how you want them to. It just happens. So you need to practice, and you need to plan for more than what you think you'll need. Because if you put out 100 tomato plants, you're probably not going to get a good harvest off of 100 of those tomato plants. It may be half. It may be 3/4. It may only be 1/4. You never know. I remember one year I put out 150 tomato plants, and they were about halfway to where they needed to be, half grown, and a massive storm came through and destroyed every one of them. So things like that happen, and that's why you need to prepare ahead, start learning now. And as things are starting to warm up, especially for some of you, you're getting to that time of the year to start preparing your garden spaces. Start making plans of where it's going to be, how big you can handle, what you need to bring in. You need to bring mulch, compost, more soil to amend it. Your seeds, do you have your seeds? I've partnered with a new company. I'll be talking about it more later on in other videos, but it's called True Leaf Market. There is a description below. This is a small producer, family-owned business that sells non-GMO, organic heirloom seeds for your gardens, herb seeds, sprouts, things like that. There'll be a link in the description. The prices are pretty much just like everybody else's, but it's a small producer, and they are maintaining their orders right now. They're not behind on anything. So if you're in the market to buy seeds, you can check them out. And I do it quick if you can, wherever you buy from. It doesn't matter to me where you buy from, but I would do it quick because it's not going to take very long before they start running out of seeds. Because that's what happened last year, and it happens a lot, but in tough times like we're in right now, people are buying up their seeds a lot faster. But you need to be growing your own food. You need to be raising food. You need to be producing it by raising animals. If you eat meat, most of you do, we do. This is very critical. I know that it's super cool to talk about all the tactical cool stuff and gear and bug out bags and weapons and stuff. And I know it's sensational to talk about the latest thing in the news that just, gets you all fired up because these dog-burn communists are trying to take over our country and we need to stand up. I know that gets most of the views. I see it on my end. When I post a video, I see the difference in view count. But this is the kind of stuff that's going to make or break you and save your life potentially of growing your own food. So I have some numbers here, and I'm going to go over these and understand that these are very general numbers. Where you live, things are going to grow differently. 1 acre of ground produces differently in different parts of the country, even within the state, different elevations, all that kind of stuff. So we're talking very general terms. And some of these numbers where I got figures from were for big, huge farming, where they go in and put hundreds and hundreds of acres of corn or whatever. And so they're using herbicides, pesticides, all that kind of stuff. So their numbers may be different than what you get, but at least this is kind of going to get you within the ballpark, all right? For a garden size, the recommended, if you look online, everywhere I looked, they recommend at least 200 square foot of garden space per family member. I think that's small. I mean, if that's all you can do, then that's a good start. I personally think that's small. I would double that. In fact, Our garden space is probably triple that, or more maybe. We have a very large garden. And when I'm saying garden space, I'm talking about just your standard vegetables. Okay, these are cucumbers, maybe beans, tomatoes, just your standard lettuce, things that are your normal onions, that kind of stuff. Your normal garden vegetables, right? I would do at least a minimum of 200 square foot per person. 200 square foot per person. So a family of 4, you're talking about 800 square foot. Again, that's the minimum. Start planting fruit trees, blueberries, grapes, things that once they get going, you really don't have to do much to them. You may have to prune them every year, but they're going to grow on their own. If you haven't started them already, you need to get on it, because it takes usually a few years for these things to produce. Blueberries sometimes can produce the year you plant them, depending on the maturity of the plant you're putting in. But trees, 3, 5, 7 years, depending on what you're planting, before they start producing. But then once they produce, you kind of don't have to do too much to them. And so I would strongly encourage you to get some fruit trees. With most fruit trees, you need at least 2 so that they can pollinate. Apples are excellent. Most apple species, they produce really good. Around here, a lot of people don't know it. When you have a lot of these juniper trees, you get apple rust, but there are certain varieties that are resistant to that. And you can plant those, and you don't have, and it's just where it's kind of like a fungus that grows on the apples. So get those perennial type fruits and vegetables, rhubarb, things like that you just kind of put out there, and asparagus that just keeps coming back. Now, let's get to some actual numbers, because where a lot of people the difference between normal gardening and really long-term, self-sustaining, growing your food to the point that you're really living solely off of what you produce, you almost need to do more than just garden. You really do. There are certain crops that you should plant kind of almost separately. And we're talking like wheat, beans, corn, potatoes, squash, that kind of stuff. I usually have a separate garden for those. And try to produce a lot. These are things that you can put away in a root cellar, that you can put in a bucket. That they're easy to preserve, especially squash. There's really not, winter squash, you don't have to do anything. Just keep it cool and dry, and it'll stay pretty much all winter long. Some of these other things, you have to dry them a little bit. But these are your hardcore staples, So I've crunched some numbers. We're talking a 40 by 50 foot garden spot here. That's approximately a 1/16 of an acre. Approximately, okay? 40 foot by 50 foot. Not terribly big. It's about the average size of a backyard for a lot of, suburban houses. If you have 40 by 50 foot of wheat, you should be able to produce somewhere in the neighborhood, in one planting, 137 pounds of wheat. 1/16 of an acre, 40 by 50 foot of wheat, depending on the ground and the climate, where you're at, and all that kind of stuff, the type of wheat. These are general terms. 137 pounds. That's quite a bit. Probably would be enough for the average family to have a year's worth of flour. On average, I would guess. I haven't done the numbers on that for average family, but that would be normal. Corn is a lot more. Now, I think these numbers are not realistic for the average person, because corn is the most chemically produced, food on the planet. So these numbers are coming from these big, huge corporate farms that they're dumping all kinds of chemicals to get the most optimal growth. So I'm going to give you what the number is, but I think it would probably be half, maybe 3/4 of this number. In a 40 by 50 foot, 1/16 of an acre, average corn production should be somewhere in the neighborhood of 600 pounds. I would say probably 300 to 450 pounds. And that's if you do a really good job. You do it right. You got to keep them raccoons out of it, keep your bugs out of it, and there are techniques that you can use that are organic to keep these things out of it. or to maintain your crop as best as possible. Beans, 16th of an acre, depending on the beans, anywhere between 60 and 100 pounds for a 16th of an acre, 40 by 50 foot is what you should look at. Potatoes are high yield, depending on how you produce, the soil, and what variety. But a 40 by 50 foot, 16th of an acre, you could get upwards of 2,000 pounds of potatoes. Probably not, because again, this is big corporate farming numbers. So you kind of have to downsize that. It's just like a milk cow. If you look at what the average Holstein cow produces, gallons per day in a big milk farm, big old dairy farm, I mean, they're producing 12 to 16 gallons a day. A little homestead like this, your average little cow may only produce 2-3 gallons a day, maybe even less than that, because you're not pushing them. Same thing with your vegetables. So you're not going to get these numbers, but at least it gives you an idea. Squash, 40 by 50 foot, 1/16th of an acre, 625 pounds. I would say it'd probably be less than 500. All depends on the squash, man. I have planted certain varieties of winter squash in the past, and it's like they're just coming out of your ears. So it really just depends on what you're producing. Herb garden. This is something else I do separately from just the normal vegetable garden. I have herb gardens, and because a lot of your herbs, whether it's culinary or medicinal, and a lot of them are flowery and they're pretty and stuff, I have this kind of broken up all over the yard. I don't usually just have one spot like a standard vegetable garden. But I would advise on your medicinal herbs and probably even your culinary herbs to try to produce close to a 2-year supply every year. You can always give them away. You can always store them away in your preps. The reason is that herbs, culinary and medicinal, are a little bit more finicky than your standard vegetable. And so sometimes they just may not produce. So if you're producing something that you're kind of dependent on, maybe for a medicinal purpose, and then you don't have any production that year, it doesn't do very good, then what are you going to do? So I try to produce a little extra each year. And I would recommend starting off in the neighborhood of 400 to 500 square foot garden, or garden space total for that. And then you can work up from there depending on what you're planting. Let's get on to some meat. Those are standard kind of vegetable numbers. I didn't go into stuff like nut trees and or tapping for syrup. That's going even more advanced. But let's look at meat. Here's the reason why I like smaller breed animal livestock, because it takes less room. Now, if you're fortunate enough to have a lot of acreage to where you can maintain several head of cattle and also have enough to produce all the hay for them for the winter, that's fine. A lot of us don't. So I like the smaller breed. Small breed sheep and goat, and we have Shetland sheep, so I'm going to use them as an example. I should be able to easily have 6 to 8 per acre. Probably even more. That's a good, comfortable number. I have no doubt that I could have 10 or 12 an acre. They're going to be a little bit harder on that acre, meaning they're going to eat it down more. And if you split that acre in half and do rotational grazing, it's going to help more. But I think 6 to 8, and this is that we have 6, and it's totally enough space. And then if you had about a 1/4 acre of hay, of pasture, 1/4 to 1/2 acre of pasture that you raise just for hay, and cut it, 2 to 3 times a year, you should be pretty good on your sheep. So you could be completely sustainable with your sheep on 2 acres or less. Now, how much meat does that produce? So the average sheep, Shetland sheep, they're small, but they're very meat dense, very meaty, stocky type of animal, even though they're short. So you should be able to end up getting around 50 to 60 pounds of meat when you butcher. And each ewe produces 2 to 3 sheep a year, 2 to 3 lambs a year. So you're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood, if you have 6 sheep, you're looking, and that's like 1 ram, and the rest are ewes, you're looking at in the neighborhood of 450 to 650 pounds of meat per year. That's not bad. That's not bad. That may not be as much as producing 1 beef a year, but you're using a whole lot less space. They're a lot easier to work with. You don't have to put as much time into them, and they're a lot safer because they're little bitty things, okay? If they get a little ornery or something, they're small. I can pick them up with one hand. Chickens, and I'm wrapping this up because the video is going a little longer than I expected. For instance, last year we produced, this last year, 2020, we produced 450 pounds of chicken meat. That's how much we put up, was 450 pounds. Wasn't that difficult. And it's something that you can easily do in a small space. Chickens don't, I mean, you can raise that many in a backyard. Your neighbors may not like it if you live in the city, so I don't recommend it, but it doesn't take that much space. That's not even including the eggs, okay? I'm just talking about meat. Of course, if you raise your chickens for eggs, you're going to have eggs every day, just about. Especially if you have, a couple of dozen hens. You should have 10 to 12 eggs per day if you have a couple of dozen hens. And that's more than enough. You're going to have eggs coming out your ears. You're going to be feeding them to your animals and putting them, preserving them for long term, which is fine. Eggs are excellent protein. This is the kind of stuff you got to start thinking about. Don't just say, we're just going to put out a garden. Start putting some numbers to it. Figure out how much you need to grow, how much food that you need for your size of your family, and then look at the land that you have or the land that you're wanting to get so that you can have a better idea of how much you need to produce. Now, this isn't that much, really. It really isn't that much food or that much space. And as far as the quarter acre thing or 16th acre thing, I wouldn't necessarily produce all that. If you took a half acre and broke that up into, you would still produce a lot of food. Maybe produce 3 or 4 of those items on a quarter acre. You would have a ton of food on top of your vegetables. So this is the kind of stuff that you need to do, again, to figure out how you can produce enough food for your family to live off of, and not just a garden to supplement your food, which is going to be extremely necessary, I think, in the near future. All right, folks, thank you all for watching. I'll catch you in the next video.